Forrest Gump was a movie that was made in 1994. The movie takes place in the 1950s and goes through the 1990s. It follows the story of a man named Forrest Gump, who's a boy at a young age who has disabilities both physically and mentally. Forrest's young age has a low IQ, which kind of limits him in school and in the ways he's able to learn. So his mom tries to get him into a normal school, but they recommend that he goes to a school for special needs kids, which his mother ends up pressuring him and other people in the community and allows him to get into a normal school. And physically, he has leg braces, so those leg braces limit how he can walk. And eventually, through pressure and being bullied by other people, he ends up running out of the leg braces, and that running kind of propels him through the entire story. So he's on his family's kind of like old plantation in Alabama, and he's running, and he runs through his braces, and that part of the movie kind of goes through his story through running. And he runs one day through a football field, and the coach sees how fast he is and puts him on the team, and that leads to him going to the University of Alabama to play football because of his speed. At the University of Alabama, he's kind of important in a large historical context, just because he's at several big things. He can be seen at the desegregation of the University of Alabama, where African Americans are trying to desegregate the school. And then also he plays for the football team, which is probably the greatest football team in college football. And then also after college, the day he graduates, he meets someone that pressures him to go into the Army. And at that time, the Army was fighting in the Vietnam War. So Forrest entered the Vietnam War, and he made some of his best friends there, and especially a man named Bubba. Bubba is kind of the cool part of the story where Forrest meets someone that's very similar to him, and through the Vietnam War, Forrest ends up winning the Medal of Honor for saving several of his battalion members. And after the war, several big things happen. He meets JFK, there's the assassination of JFK, and then eventually he ends up being involved in Watergate because where he's staying, and just several big historical context things, which is kind of the thing of the movie. He's just involved in some of the biggest events in history so far. And then eventually the biggest part of the movie is when he meets his end up being wife Jenny. Jenny's a girl that he meets at a super young age, and she's kind of his love story through the entire part of the movie. And at the end, she finally ends up loving him back, and they have a kid together. And then kind of in the 1990s, the big HIV epidemic was going, so they had a kid together, and then she died of HIV. So that's kind of how the movie ends up ending. Some main themes in the movie are that love conquers all. So Forrest is kind of going for this identity of love the entire movie, and he's always putting love before hate in all scenarios. Even when segregation was a big issue, Forrest never understood that. He actually went to a Black Panthers meeting and didn't really think anything of it. So that's kind of an interesting part of the movie. And he is best friends with an African American, and he ends up buying his friend Bubba's shrimp boat after he gets out of the Vietnam War. And just several other things happen when he invests in Apple and pays for Bubba's family to get a better house and better lifestyle. And a kind of cool point is that it shows that Bubba's family had been cooking for people their entire lives on plantations and stuff, and because of Forrest's generosity and love, they're able to cook for themselves now, and they're actually hired a chef, which is kind of cool. And then it kind of shows a scene where they're cooking for somebody, and then eventually they're the ones being cooked for. So yeah, love conquers all is a point, and then triumph over adversity is another big point. So he's able to come overwhelming obstacles. When he's in Vietnam, his battalion's being bombed, and eventually he saves close to 8 of his battalion members and can overcome that adversity. He gets shot in the butt and eventually becomes a national ping pong star. So the main point of the movie is kind of following this boy with limitations at the beginning, and as he goes through the entire story, he just shows that he does amazing things. He runs across the United States, and it won a lot of awards it won an Oscar for Best Picture, and it was kind of one of the best movies made in the 1990s. And so yeah, the story of Forrest Gump is one that is a good movie to watch and has won many awards.